to hear the words that your small child needs blood is not what you expect. Everybody's mental thought is that children are always healthy and they have what they need and they're gonna grow and prosper.
Our adoption story was very quick, a lot quicker than we expected it to be. In 2014, we decided to move forward with adopting through DHS, and we started classes in February, took and got certified in July. So we finished all of our requirements in July. And then by the end of July, we were matched with Grayson, our older son. And what's really neat is when we got to meet Grayson, there was a little boy named Jose there who was stuck to Grayson like glue and crawled all over us, and we got to love on him. And the foster parents, which are really good friends now, they just kept joking, "Oh, we'll see you in 6 months when you get Jose." And so we were crazy, but we just kind of knew in our heart that he was ours. And a year and a half later, he finally got to come home to us. They are wild, for sure. Grayson is very rambunctious, but if you get him to slow down, he's very nurturing. He worries about everybody and he wants to know what's going on. He's very analytical. He wants to know how things work and how exactly everything fits together. Jose is just courageous and self-confident, and he knows what he wants, and he's very stubborn, so he will fight for it. Jose definitely loves superheroes. About a month after he came home, his babysitter had an Iron Man costume. He pretty much put it on every day when he got there and was Iron Man all the time, and that's all he wanted to talk about. We were actually on a family shopping trip in September when we noticed that Jose had some bleeding from one of his ears. And we weren't sure, he was 3 at the time, so did you stick anything in it? We talked through it, but he was super energetic. I kept going through everything in my mind. He's super energetic, he's not lethargic. But we took him to the doctor because bleeding is definitely not normal. And so we went to the doctor for the bleeding, and she noticed he had some bruising that wasn't normal on the back of his legs, places where I knew little boys get bruises all the time, but I never thought about, he's not gonna hit the back of his calf on something. So he had a big bruise in the back of his calf. He also had a growth on one of his lymph nodes behind his ear that an ENT had previously told us was just a cyst. And we actually had scheduled a surgery for the next month to drain that. And so the pediatrician just kind of put it all together and was like, we're gonna send you for a CBC, get his blood counts. And so from there, we kind of knew something bigger was happening. His diagnosis came about 3 days later from going to the pediatrician. She ordered a blood count that day, and then the next day we found out that it had clots in it, so they couldn't get a good count. So the next day we went for another one, and then later that day she called us and said that she had sent a referral to the oncology clinic in Oklahoma City, and we had an appointment for the next day. So at the oncology clinic, they drew blood and ran it through their lab again for the blood count. And I would say it wasn't probably about an hour later when we talked to the doctor, and the doctor showed that it said that he had blasts in his blood. So it showed that he had leukemia and that they would be admitting us to the hospital, and we would be there overnight. And I believe they told us at that time that he would need a bone marrow aspiration, and we would get that later to determine what type of leukemia it was and the treatment that goes from there. When we were admitted, they also told us that his red blood cell and his plasma was really low, so he would have to receive a transfusion for those to get his numbers up well enough to start chemo and other types of treatment.
There's nothing you can do to prepare for what a doctor tells you your kid's got leukemia. Care how strong of an individual you think you are, you're not. As parents, you want to protect your children. As a dad, it's your job to protect the family. And that's something that's kind of out of your hands when your child goes through treatment and receiving blood and platelets, which we've taken both. Helpless. It makes you feel utterly helpless.
He very quickly showed us that he wasn't scared of what was going to happen. He had been used to being in and out of the hospital from when he was younger, and so he wasn't ever anxious about going. We were able to talk him through, when he got an IV, and he just, if something bothered him, he pretty much zoned it out, and he was in his own world. He was going to run down the hall to the toy he wants when he was done, and he was just going to push through and do what he wants. And if a doctor's there that he didn't like what he was saying, he was going to ignore them. And he was going to have fun and put gloves on his feet and hop around like a frog until he felt better.
Because you have to tell yourself, even those days when you're ready to give up, that, I'm a grown adult and I'm ready to give up, but yet I've got a 5 and a 6-year-old that, have the strength to push through all of this. Most people don't realize the importance of donating. Usually donation spots have a really good turnout, but most people don't know what they're donating for or where that blood goes.
The blood transfusions and platelets were very important. Looking back, at first we thought it was just a small part of his journey, but looking back, we couldn't have moved forward at all without the blood transfusions.
Along with other things as far as the medicines and stuff with his treatment, blood has been a pretty vital, important part. Without that, he wouldn't be here. We try to make life as normal as it can be. God will pull you through it whether you want to or not. So I was definitely not ready to go through this. Christina's kind of the binding that holds us together and keeps our sanity.
This diagnosis was huge for our family. Jose had only been in our family for about 4 months at that point. We had known him for a year and a half before that, but as far as being with us full time and us still trying to build that bond between all 4 of us and getting my older son acclimated to the new changes was a big deal. And so to throw a leukemia diagnosis in there was very huge. It definitely turned it upside down. We had no routine, which we clung to very desperately with adoption, as the only thing that was steady for them was our routine, what we could do every day, that they could count on us. And at that point, I felt like they couldn't count on anything from us. We couldn't promise them we would be home. My older son still today has a really hard time with us leaving, because we would go to the doctor and he wouldn't know. He would be at school and something would happen and we'd end up being admitted for 2 to 3 days. And it was very hard, and it was very hard for me to know how to mother them through that and make them feel secure and safe with us when I couldn't tell them exactly what was going on or what to expect.
You still have to tell yourself there's a reason that this is happening. It's out of our control. It's in his hands. It's out of ours. And we have to trust that, God's going to push us through. And he has. And if anything, we've become a closer, stronger family for it.